Sleep, women's health, data, and a ring that's changing the game. I sat down with Dor Kilroy, Chief Commercial Officer at Oura, to talk about how sleep tracking is finally catching up, especially for women. From jet lag to shift work to heart health, this conversation might just change how you think about rest. Let's get into it. Dor, thank you so much for sitting down with us today to chat about Oura. So your background, you've come from Airbnb, like sleepless nights, to Oura Ring, which is tracking sleep professionally. So what made you take that leap into this sector?
Yeah, I think my story is like a lot of people's story. I was a burnt out executive. I was a new mom. I was completely sleep deprived myself. And I didn't really understand how to take care of my health. So I started using Oura years before I actually came to work for Oura. And I just learned so much about what my body needed. And it, for the first time, gave me permission to take care of myself, which was huge.
That is huge and quite a change. So how long have you been with Oura now?
Yes.
You've been a couple of years?
Yes. So I joined about 2.5 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was particularly excited about this particular form factor. You know, first of all, it's jewelry and it's beautiful and it fits in with my life. But I was also excited that the direction the company was going. So everybody sleeps, but not necessarily knows how to sleep very well. Perception versus reality is quite different. What we also learned was that when you are asleep at night, your body is completely at rest. And it's an excellent time to take your biometrics. We measure over 50 different biometrics at Oura, and these are part of our sleep algorithms and our readiness algorithms. And they measure everything from your heart rate and your heart rate variability to your body temperature. And so there's just an enormous amount of data that we can gather on your health while you're sleeping.
I think the trend has changed a little now, where beforehand people are like, oh, I only got 2 hours sleep, and that was a positive.
Yes.
To now people being much more aware. What have you learned since your time at Oura in the impact on your body and your brain and not getting enough sleep?
I was definitely somebody who thought I'll sleep when I die. I used to pride myself in my younger days saying that I don't need much sleep. And I thought that that was some kind of superpower. When I actually looked at my data, it turned out I needed a lot more sleep than I thought. And so when you start to break down that data and you realize what good sleep hygiene does, you realize that actually how much better you feel when you have good sleep. And that is quite addictive. We've also seen in the data, though, users tell us incredible stories of the power of getting a good night's sleep and what it does for them. More studies are coming out about the damage that bad sleep does too. They're linking it to early stage Alzheimer's. They're linking it to poor hormone health. Everything from your immunity suffers to the lack of being able to lose weight. They're all actually related to our sleep.
Oura has done some incredible work around hormones and women's health, menopause.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that and why that's been important to do that?
Yes, we did a sleep study recently on over 100,000 women, and we looked at them over a year. And we all know how under-researched women's health is. One of the things that we were able to see is for women in a menopausal state, how much their sleep suffers. Over 60% of them were getting a lot less sleep than younger women. And so with looking at that, you realize just how much it impacts that. We're obviously measuring a lot more than your sleep with an Oura Ring. So we can see changes in your heart rate variability and how that manifests into your stress. We also are detecting things like your heart rate and seeing how that lowers at night. And we noticed that the changes that women face, so everything from having more night sweats to temperature fluctuations, they're just much greater for women going through that phase of life. One of the things that we do with the Oura Ring is we measure your cycle. So within a great degree of accuracy, we can predict when your cycle is. Your cycle is measured a lot by your progesterone levels, and your temperature is an incredible indicator of what your progesterone levels are. So when we see that drop in your temperature, which is related to progesterone, we can measure when your cycle is actually going to be and where you are in your cycle.
How are you at Oura helping us not to get overwhelmed, like make it helpful? How are you addressing that?
One of the first things is, you'll notice we don't have a screen. I think none of us need more screens in our life. We know the damage of that. So Oura is there when you need it. It is not pushing to you. You can check in on it when you need it. I think for most people, though, the reality is they don't know what good health is. And we talk about at Oura how it gives your body a voice. So it is telling you what your body is feeling. And so for many, they need to see that data to actually be able to understand it. We take a very empathetic tone with that, though. This is not about pushing to maximize goals. It's about progress and not perfection. We also take into account people's lifestyles. So in my case, when you have younger kids and some nights you're just awake because of that, we don't make that a shameful thing. We meet members where they are and we account for life and what happens.
Yeah, that has been my experience using it, but I was curious as to how you were doing that, because it doesn't make me feel bad if I have, which I know, okay, this is not a great, night's sleep, but I feel it's still quite encouraging.
Yes.
Which is incredible on how you've done that. So you're looking much more then at trends, is that right? As opposed to kind of almost like an individual night.
Yeah, we measure against your own baseline. So we're not measuring you against others. We're measuring against what your baseline is and what good sleep is for you. That's really important for most people to know. We also measure the impacts of things that are going on in your life. So for many people, over 70% of our members, alcohol significantly disrupts their sleep. Now, we've been told that, but it's actually hard to understand how much. And so when people start to see that in the data, they can adjust their habits and their lifestyle. Another really interesting one that people observe when they wear an Oura Ring is eating late at night. And again, we know we shouldn't do it, but we don't really understand what the impact is. So when you start to see that data and you realize that, wow, my heart rate was elevated all night from just those late night snacks, you can start to attune your behavior and at least have the knowledge, if you're going to do that, what the effect is going to be.
Yeah, something I've noticed as well, which has been surprising in a good way, is that, so when it tells you like your chronotype, for me, I've always been like stay up late at night.
Yeah.
And I was really happy when it said, oh, your ideal sleep time is at 1 a.m. or 1:30. I was like, oh, this is fantastic, because I felt like, your whole life everybody's saying to you, no, you should always be at this time. So this personalization is incredible. How have you gone about that at Oura?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned chronotype, which is such an interesting insight. Each of us have a unique chronotype of what our body clock and our circadian rhythm is. So you mentioned you're a late night person. I'm an early morning person. And what I've realized is that actually I do my best work in the morning. Learning that allows you to start to adjust your lifestyle differently, whether that is, for me, deep work in the morning. I start my workday pretty early. Some others like to enjoy a workout earlier in the day, but it's not a shameful thing if you enjoy that at the other end of the day and you can get your deep work at night done.
Yeah, well, and I think that's so important so we don't get discouraged as well.
Exactly.
And that the data is relevant to us. Now, I've read that Oura are working not just, with selling to consumers like myself, but also with researchers, doctors. I think I even read yesterday some astronauts are wearing, is that right?
That's true. We are lucky to work with NASA, and NASA has been studying the use of Oura Rings, whether it's astronauts in space or even a recent study that they did on underwater studies. And they looked at the physiology that is actually happening when your body is under extreme conditions. So what's happening to our heart rate? What's happening to our stress levels? We measure stress levels with Oura. We also look at things like symptom radar and whether you're getting sick or not. So there's a lot we've learned with that. Interestingly, we've done some incredible studies with researchers, one out of the University of Singapore. And they looked at the impact of shift work, on physicians. And no surprise, this is a major disruptor of their sleep. But what they studied and found was that people who had a fixed shift schedule versus those that had a floating shift schedule had very different outcomes. And the outcomes affected everything from their mood to their attention and performance in their job. They also found that those that were actually able to take a nap during their shift had much better results. So I think being able to study these things, the practicalities of some people's jobs that require them to work on shifts, is just really interesting. And we're really only beginning to understand that for the first time.
Yeah, that's really exciting as well, because if somebody can't change what they do, maybe there's steps, like nudges that the Oura Ring can give. So on that, I haven't used it yet, but I noticed there's the Oura Advisor.
Yes.
Is that kind of what that's there to do, to try and help you with some solutions?
Exactly. So Oura Advisor is our AI coach that actually lives with you all the time. I think about how amazing it would be to have a doctor in your pocket at all times. And that's really what our AI coach does. The Oura Advisor is not making you do all the guesswork. It actually allows you to ask questions and to get responses of what's happening. It also can look back in history at your data. And so it can remember things that you might have forgotten, whether you might have tagged an injury that you had, some medication that you were taking, different things that are going on in your life. And it actually helps unpack it for you so that you're not guessing. You can actually get the advice you need.
Yeah, and I think, and then you see the results, which is really encouraging.
Yes.
Is there something for you personally that's really changed since you've been wearing it? You mentioned you've been wearing it a long time, but...
Yeah, I think I've been wearing it for over 5 years now. And one of the things that I've been able to adjust is life happens. You know, everything from having young kids, demanding job, aging parents that are being affected by different illnesses. And I think it's being able to see what all of those effects are having on my body and being able to adjust to take care of myself as I need it. It also gives me moments where, you know, my readiness is really good, and it allows me to be able to then push myself on those days too. So it's not all negative. It really gives me that confidence to say, hey, you know what? I can really go crush it in work today. Or maybe I have more energy for my kids this afternoon and I can like really get down and do some rough play with them.
Yeah, because I've also found that conversely when I've seen it, and it's like, oh, major signs, you know, your body's under stress, or, you know, my recovery rate is not great. So I'm like, here's the evidence to anybody who's like, before you deal with me today, have you had any funny stories around?
Yeah, we have incredible member stories. Honestly, this is the thing that really motivates me about working at Oura. You know, I'll give you a few. We have a member, Linda, who told us a story. She's a shift worker. We were just talking about that. And Linda was finishing her shift with a high intensity workout. She thought that this is what her body needed. And what she saw was her recovery scores were actually really low when she did HIIT workouts. So she's adjusted how she's been actually working out after a shift, and she does more low intensity exercise. Even some more serious stories. We had a member, Nikki, who's a nurse in Virginia. She's 26 years old, and she started to get a lot of exhaustion. She had night sweats. Her Oura symptom radar was telling her there was major signs of stress on her body. So she took the ring and the data to her doctor, and she was able to. They were able to run tests, and it turns out she actually had Hodgkin's lymphoma. So not ignoring what's going on in your body is actually really important to our health. You know, personally, I have found myself in my perimenopause years, just the impact of my hormone changes on my brain fog. And I've been able to really adjust my lifestyle to see what changes I needed. I'll give you some examples. You know, working out late in the evening has not been great for me. So I try to prioritize that earlier in the day. Reducing my caffeine later in the day too. That's a huge one. That has massively changed sort of my brain fog and my ability to just think straight. And then lastly, the late night snacking. That is the hardest one, if I'm honest. But I've seen much better results in my data.
I mean, I also feel like you're maybe making sleep a little cooler. And like that helps, doesn't it? Because it's perception again about sleep. What would you say to somebody who was thinking about, getting like an Oura Ring, but they're just afraid they're going to get overwhelmed with data, or get more anxious? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I think we all feel that way because we're afraid that it's going to uncover something that we don't want to see. I think that most of us, 3 out of every 4 adults have poor sleep disturbances, hygiene. And so I don't actually think this is something that is totally intuitive for most of us. I think it's really valuable when you change what perception to reality is. Oura is not in any way set up to make any of us be perfect. It is really to meet you where you are and all of the things that life throws at us. But it's to give your body a voice. It's to actually show you what is happening to your body. I find most people actually really enjoy how empathetic it is. And it doesn't shame them. It doesn't scream at them to get up and run a marathon. It doesn't tell them that they are failing. It really shows them just the progress they're making and not the perfection.
Because one thing is, in this sleep series that a lot of sleep researchers have been saying to me about how often the challenge is people don't recognize their symptoms during the day. They don't associate it with their sleep. Have you found this, Oura?
Yes, for sure. Particularly, our circadian rhythms, as we talked about, are all very unique. So the different things you do at different times of the day. We're studying a lot more at Oura metabolism and metabolic health. And so understanding not just when you eat, which is really important, but what you eat, high fiber diets, protein. We're all very individual, right? And so being able to experiment yourself and see then how your data reacts. The number of times you will have a friend tell you about some great diet that worked for them and it just didn't work for you and you can't understand why. But I just think having that very individual data on yourself and not a fad or not some general advice, but actually your own health is just super valuable to know what to do.
Yeah, and super empowering.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
So is there anything exciting coming up with Oura that you can tell us about?
Well, I can't tell you all the secrets on our roadmap, I'll say that. But, some of the areas that we're really excited to continue to study is metabolism, metabolic health, cardiovascular health. And then personally, I am just so excited to continue to invest in women's health. Such an underserved, understudied area, and our biology is so fascinating. So we'll continue to invest there.
That's fantastic. Can I just ask you a few fun things finally?
Sure. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so melatonin, you've probably just been on a long haul flight.
Yes. I love to use melatonin when I travel. Jet lag is an incredible amount of stress in the body. So our data shows that it affects people for up to 15 days afterwards. And that is an enormous stressor on the body. So if you ever are taking a flight, even if it's 2 or 3 hour time difference, you really should not feel bad about the extra sleep that you might need when you get there because your body really craves it.
Is there like a very bizarre thing that you've heard people do to try and sleep better or something?
I have heard of some couples having a sleep divorce. Have you heard of this?
No, but it sounds interesting.
So a sleep divorce is where they sleep in separate beds because they value their sleep hygiene so much. I don't know if everyone needs to go to that extreme, but I've also heard some people say that actually just having a separate sleep cover means that they're not disturbed by their partner when they sleep. So I do think there's probably some good habits in between that.
Have you found that you've, just by seeing this millions of nights sleep that Oura has tracked, that you're maybe more empathetic to how we're all sort of so
sleep deprived?
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the amazing things is when you meet somebody else who has an Oura Ring, it's actually a really interesting connection straight away. You're so excited to learn what their scores are and you're excited to learn what works for them. So I do find that it is this great conversation connector. It turns out that as humans, we really actually like to care for each other, and often we don't really know how to ask those questions. So it's become this incredible connector. Interestingly, Irish people, we have seen in our data, actually sleep less than those in the UK and those in the US, which is fascinating. And, you know, personally, being from Ireland, I've wondered this, you know, why? And I think it has to do with some of the incredible work ethic that people have in Ireland. You know, they're just really hard workers. And so they'll probably push themselves to the limit that much more. And I don't know if we always know what our limit is. And so it's great to get that feedback on our body. So I'm hoping Oura can help a lot of Irish people know what that limit is.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It'll be interesting in a year's time to see if a lot more people in Ireland have the ring, if they've improved it.
Yeah, I'm rooting for Ireland. I hope they have better scores than the US for sure.
Dor, you mentioned about sleep and alcohol. Can you tell us a bit more about what you've learned?
Yes. So no surprise, and maybe disappointing, but alcohol obviously has a massive impact on our sleep. And we see this in about 70% of our members. So some members do not see significant impact. But what we've seen in the data is that most people's, their sleep gets disturbed. And we see it particularly in their heart rate variability, which is a great measurement of the stress that is happening in their body. Interestingly, the data shows that it is not just on the night that you drink, but that stress actually continues for several nights for some people. So when we have felt that difference, it is not in your head, that is real, and the stress that it impacts in your body is quite significant.
Yeah. Can I ask you a little more? So when you're talking about heart rate variability, that is the HRV acronym that we're always seeing. So are we looking for the number on that? Is it like to go up or down or?
Yes. So again, a very individual metrics, and everyone's HRV metric is going to be very different. So not a great one to compare to each other. That said, the higher the HRV, the actual better it is. And so you will see this as a measurement that elite athletes use as a way to understand how their body has recovered. So you might find that you have your baseline HRV at around 50. That's my HRV. But what I find is on some big weeks where I have a lot going on in work or my life is particularly stressful, I'll see that fall down. It's really poor when you are sick. You can really see the impact on your body. But what's wonderful is to see when you actually take time to restore, whatever that is for you. And it's very individual, whether that's taking a walk in nature, a meditation, running a bath before you go to bed at night, you can see your HRV climb up. So it's lovely to actually see some of the things you might enjoy in life actually improving it. One of the really fun ones for me is actually seeing the quality time I spend with friends and family. I see my HRV improve. It's good for us to have those connections.
I have been at many conferences in the last couple of months on well-being and happiness, and community seems to be such a key thing in well-being. And it seems like what you're saying as well, across really probably to mental health as well, then it's...
Absolutely. You know, we measure stress with the Oura Ring, and it gives you a daytime picture of your stress, which is fascinating because you can see the things that impact it, whether it's certain foods, certain social engagements that just give people a lot of stress. The flip side of it is we are also measuring your recovery. So we see the things that bring you back into that restorative state. And for each of us, that's actually quite unique. So it's wonderful to kind of see. For me, I love having a cup of tea in the evening, non-caffeinated, not so much fun, but I love getting into that restorative state and seeing what those small little habits are that you can do to make that better.
Yeah, I love that. I love that there are things you can do. And that's, I think, something as well that I've been really encouraged by with the learning now, is that with the data, you go, okay, so if I can do this, it is making a measurable difference, which is incredible.
I mean, you mentioned some sleep disturbances people have. Often the doom scrolling late at night, you know, and you can see in your data how badly that affects your sleep. And I think it's beyond just the doom scrolling. I think it's the content that we're consuming late at night. And so if that is very negative, and we all know the news at the moment is incredibly depressing, and it is very terrifying at times too. And so you can see the impact that that has on your body. So I often think not just what you are eating, but what you're consuming, and really the impact of the stress that that has on you.
It's so exciting. It's so exciting to be able to get this feedback, and I'm sure the data you're seeing. So if we were looking again at women's health, so around pregnancy, are you getting much data?
Yes. So I'm super passionate about this area. As I mentioned, some of the features that we've launched as I mentioned, we share with the woman where they are in their cycle. So we map out their cycle from their follicular phase to their luteal phase. And they can see across that the changes in their stress levels, their changes in their sleep, their changes in that heart rate variability. So they can really get this full picture. I like to say that it gives you kind of a weather forecast of what's going on in your body. And it's just wonderful to be able to get that every month. We also have some great features for those that are trying to conceive. They're able to use Oura to predict their ovulation based on a temperature input into the algorithm. And that gives them a great degree of accuracy when they're actually trying to conceive, which for many is a very stressful time about being able to make sure that they get that right. And then we have great features for when you are pregnant. We are able to detect the gestational age of the baby and really focus on the maternal health of the mom. So how is the mom doing, which is often overlooked. I think it is a very frightening time for many people when they're going through pregnancy and they have no idea what's happening in their body until they get to their next doctor's appointment. So our goal is to give them as much visibility into what's actually happening as possible.
I love that. And I think all women have experienced, thinking that something's just in their head, or maybe they're overreacting, or they don't want to be the one that's overreacting, but to have that feedback.
Yeah, and not to feel gaslit. Within the Oura experience, we have a feature that women love, which gives them an ability to download a PDF of their cycle report and take it into their doctor so that they can show all of the things that are happening. And I think this is particularly important for women as they're going through the transition of perimenopause. Again, like you said, it is not in their head. There are physiological changes happening in their body. And if they can actually have the guidance of a good physician to help them understand that, and also what they can do to alleviate that.
Yeah. And I think if anybody's not aware of this, women's health has been massively underserved.
Yes.
Women have just not been included in most of the research.
And the fascinating thing is our biology is actually really interesting because it's always changing. So we are really interesting to study as a gender. So, I find it really fascinating how much we're actually going to learn with more data. Some of the exciting areas that we are studying at the moment are around menopause and the impact that that has on your overall health. This is a time when women's cardiovascular health changes significantly, and heart disease is the #1 killer of women. Sadly, it's really silent, and so we often don't realize it's happening until too late. And so I think giving women a baseline of where they're at and watching how that changes over time is really important so they feel empowered to see what those changes are.
Yeah, it's been listening to Dr. Suzanne Steinbaum. I interviewed her recently as cardiologist, talking about how different it is when a woman has a heart attack.
The symptoms are totally different. Yes.
Everything. So this is incredible that you are tracking everything like this. I think it's pretty revolutionary for women.
For sure. Another area that's really linked to cardiovascular health is metabolic health. And we recently were able to integrate continuous glucose monitor data into your Oura Ring so that it gave a picture for people on actually what was happening with their blood glucose related to their day. Blood glucose is massively impacted by the food you eat, and you can actually use Oura as a food log for what you're eating during the day. But it's also very much impacted by the stress we have in our bodies and the sleep that we're having. So when you start to map all of these things together, it can help people that are either on a weight loss journey or they're just trying to improve their overall metabolic health.
Yeah, I'm personally very excited about that development. I've worn a continuous glucose monitor before.
Yes.
and it was before I had an Oura Ring, and it was really, really interesting, but it was just for 2 weeks. And I found that, okay, there were some, things, okay, if I do this, I do that. But I think the idea of having it where I can see it on the Oura Ring with extra data would be fantastic.
I certainly found that stress was a massive spike in my blood glucose. And so I had to be really mindful of it. And even just simple small hacks like taking 3 breaths could actually reduce my blood glucose quite significantly. And, we're told this general information on, okay, maybe doing a little bit more breathing would help us during the day. But when you actually see the data, it's really encouraging because it makes you want to do it more.
The thing that I learned in the last year that I tried to say to every female is that with Alzheimer's, that this can be starting in your 40s, the symptoms, so all related as you're talking about with menopause. And so being proactive.
Yes.
This is the thing. And I think if you have your baselines, it helps to then know when changes are happening.
I often think about if you're lucky, you'll get to 1 doctor's appointment a year. And that is just a very short appointment that just gives you 1 snapshot on that day. But it doesn't really empower you with what are the trends that are happening over time. Life gets in the way, different stressors come in and out of our lives. That is inevitable. But until we can kind of see what that impact of that is happening on your physiology, you really can't make adjustments. And, we see in the data, not just about longevity, but the health span for people is actually getting poorer and poorer. And this is terrifying. We're spending longer time with chronic health conditions and managing them. Being proactive on your health is one of the best ways to get ahead of that. And being able to see the data when things are actually changing to actually intervene and make changes earlier. Those are when the best outcomes happen.
Yeah, thank you. And it's very empowering. And it's exactly we don't want the bad news. We're trying to prevent the bad news to get ahead of it and be proactive. Yeah, it's fantastic. Thank you, Dor.
Okay.